Welcome, everybody, and welcome to our Ask the Expert session this week on the Give to Get program. And today I'm going to be hosting it. My name is Bruce Cruikshank, and today we're going to be talking about what it is to be a professional salesperson. Let me talk a little bit about my background first, and then we can go from there. I've been in sales now for almost, well, I'll say 40 years. I've been a professional sales trainer for just over 30 years, and I've trained thousands of salespeople. And my background and how I got into sales and what I do, I wanted to become a professional football player. And so when I came out of university, I was good enough to get to the professional level in the sense of a tryout, but I wasn't able to realize my dream and become a professional football player because I got cut after a few weeks into camp. And myself, like most of us, who had a sales career, we got into or fell into a sales career. That's what 96% of us do. Very few people grow up sitting around, I'll say, the kitchen table or the dining room table, saying to their parents that they want to become a professional salesperson. They talk about becoming a professional engineer. They will talk about becoming a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, but very few people talk about becoming a professional salesperson. So yet 96% of us fall into it. I fell into sales back in, I'll say, the early 80s and had an absolutely wonderful opportunity presented to me. It was a company that had just recently started to open up and do business in the Toronto market from Montreal. It was printing, and they had opened up a new location in the Toronto office, or in the Toronto market, I should say. And they started to realize how big the opportunity was in Toronto, not only Toronto, but then ultimately across Canada, which was significantly more than the opportunity in Montreal. And Remy Marcoux, the company is called Transcontinental Printing. Back then, it was about $47 million in sales. They hired my boss, who was a fellow by the name of Dennis Lompré, as the sales manager. And I'll say he was actively in selling as well, too. And they hired myself as a salesperson who also did customer service as well, too. And Remy really gave us the reins to develop a very good, I'll say, sales strategy to go after the market in the Toronto market. Make a long story short, we had a wonderful, I'll say, 8 to 10 year run. We put together a very strong sales strategy. Timing, which obviously is important in any situation as well, too, was on our side in the sense that the insert flyer market was really just starting to come of age and grow back then in the early to mid 80s in not only Toronto, but again across Canada with a lot of the major retailers. And in 8 to 10 years, we grew the business from just over $50 million in sales to about $950 million in sales. Was a tremendous opportunity for me to do a lot of learning from that point of view, grow myself as a professional salesperson, as a professional, I'll say, sales leader and manager. And we ended up investing in a lot of different sales courses, a lot of different sales programs that we could, what I'll say, stay on the cutting edge, learning edge of what was happening from a sales perspective. What I found during those, what I'll say, 8 to 9 years while we were going through that was two things that kept coming up whenever we would invest in sales training, and quite frankly, kind of disturbed me too. The first I found was most salespeople were trained how to sell the way the Wright brothers were trained how to fly, through crashes and burns. And that teaches a salesperson what not to do. It doesn't teach a salesperson what to do. So I found there was a lot of salespeople out there attempting to be successful, attempting to be professional salespeople who really didn't know what to do. They very much knew what to do or what not to do. And where I'm going with that is you can ask most salespeople what not to do in a sales call, and they can give you a list of, I'll say, things not to do as long as there are. But when you turn the question around and ask them what to do on purpose, to be successful, to be professional, to take care of the customer, like I would like to say, first, last, and always, that's very difficult. The other thing I found was that a lot of salespeople didn't get into the success that they had hoped, didn't have the sales success that they wanted, struggled both from a sales success and then ultimately from a compensation point of view, and would end up leaving the opportunity thinking that another opportunity was better, i.e. they'd be more successful, they'd earn more income, thought it was greener on the other side. I always like to say to salespeople when they're thinking that way, that yes, it is greener on the other side, but it's tougher to chew. And it's tougher to chew because you're having to start over again. You're having to start all over again, building a client base, building a network, developing your relationships with not only what I'll say your existing clients, but new clients. And so very rarely does it work out. So when it was time for me to leave Transcontinental at that time, I wanted to go out and help salespeople. So I started a sales training business, and that was, I'll say, back in the latter part of the 80s where I started my sales training business to really help salespeople. One, I wanted to train them on what to do on purpose because I had learned a few things. I'll say I was a little more arrogant and boastful back then. I thought I could help salespeople from that perspective with what my success and my experience was. And I wanted to have salespeople be more what I'll say stay at home and not bouncing from opportunity to opportunity so that they could what I'll say provide for their families more. So that was really my two motives that I started my sales training business back in the late 80s. Quickly, I got into success and I had some success starting to train salespeople, started to have a lot of fun. My big claim to fame back there was I was going to train your salespeople, and in 6 months I'd come back and I'd take them through the training again. So I started to do that. A lot of people like that idea. It helped me, what I'll say, close some business with what I call an outrageous offer. What I found though was when I came back 6 months later, that 90% of what I trained 6 months earlier had literally evaporated with the sales team. They weren't doing it. It wasn't in their part of their day-to-day routine. Which kind of bothered me, kind of frustrated me, and I kind of questioned what was going on here. So then I really started to change the model of, I'll say, training salespeople over an extended period of time and working with them until literally it became part of the culture, it became part of the routine. And an interesting statistic that even today in North America, there's $20 billion, if you can believe it, there's $20 billion that is spent on sales training each and every year. And over 90% of it evaporates within 45 days. So there's a lot of companies out there spending an awful lot of money on sales training and getting very little effect for it. And the reason is because any kind of training, if it's going to be effective, if it's going to be good, you've got to bring it into the culture. It's got to get into the hands of the people who actually use it and have them use it on a day-to-day basis until it becomes habitual. So I changed my model back then and started to train people on an extended period of time. From there, the business grew to what I'll call a sales performance management business. I started to train salespeople because once you get salespeople into what I'll say top success, professional success is the way I like to call it, they're very different than managing somebody who is struggling at sales or who is not what I'll say producing or being professional at sales. So I started to bring a sales management piece to it, and then ultimately a performance management piece to the whole culture of the business. Because if you've got the culture right in the business, it's easier for your sales leadership to what I'll say lead and manage salespeople properly. And then it's easier for salespeople to be more professional and be more successful. So that's been a little bit of my background. And I've been doing that, as I said, for just over 35 years now. Absolutely love working with salespeople, absolutely love interacting with salespeople, absolutely love what I'll say helping salespeople start to become and put them on a path of professional sales. Because once they're there, they never fall off. They see the difference, they see the value, they see what it does for the customer, and they go from there. So today I just really wanted to have a conversation back and forth. I see that Caesar's on the phone. Caesar, if you want to jump in and ask any questions or have any comments, by all means, we can do that as well too. And where I want to start from that point of view is just the profession itself. The sales profession is a wonderful profession. It's an honorable profession. It's a great profession to be what I'll call a member of. The problem is most salespeople don't look at it that way. They don't look at it as a profession. They don't look at it as a job. I put it right up there with the same as an engineer, that's a profession, or a lawyer, that's a profession, or a doctor that's professional, or an accountant that's professional. A good professional salesperson is worth their weight in gold, not only to the business owner, to the success of the business, but ultimately they ensure that all the people on the operational side, the distribution side, the production side, the accounting side, I'll say the HR side, the administrative side, literally keep coming each and every day to their job, because the salespeople are what brings in the top line revenue. And you've got to have cash flow and you've got to have revenue if you're going to run a successful business. And a good professional salesperson, I always like to say, is worth their weight in gold to a business owner from that point of view. So first step is really to have salespeople and sales professionals look at it as a profession. It is a profession. And in order to do that, then you've got to take ownership of that. You've got to take pride in that, and you've got to continue what I'll say to push yourself to a high level of performance. And we're going to talk about the difference between performance and results a little bit later on as we go forward. In order to do that, you've got to set the expectation. You've got to set what I'll say the right attitude. And here's the right attitude that I always say for a professional salesperson. And that's to do what's best for your customer first, last, and always. I like to say the customer is not always right. The customer is always important. The customer is always treated important. The customer is always respected from that point of view. And ultimately, if you do what is best for the customer first, last, and always, you're going to end up doing what is best for the business. You're going to end up doing what's best for the business owner. You're going to end up doing what's best for both in the long run. And sometimes, I'll say a lot of times, customers don't really know what they want. A good professional salesperson can help answer them that.
On a scale of 1 to 5, would you give yourself a 5 on achieving what you want in life? If your answer is anything less than a 5, right now, I have something awesome for you. Achieving your goals and living your life at a 5 isn't easy. Most people aren't prepared to focus, stay disciplined, and do the everyday work that is necessary to achieve amazing results. But since you're watching this, then I'm guessing that you're not one of those people. And this is an opportunity that will change your life. Give to Get is a global program that brings together world-class coaching and combines it with empowering masterminds and networking opportunities. We provide 5-star guidance for the price of a cup of coffee a day. To find out more, click on the link in the description of this coaching session.
So the number one first thing is really to have that attitude of, I'm a professional salesperson and I'm going to do what's best for the customer first, last, and always. The other thing about that is the attitude of really what is sales. I get in front of salespeople all the time and I ask them the question, what's our job as salespeople? I get a lot of the obvious answer, sell cars, sell hardware, sell our distribution wares, sell our materials, sell our services. And I go, no, it's not. Your job is not to sell from that point of view, because when you turn it around and you ask even salespeople, how many salespeople like to be sold? Very few people put up their hand. There is a few people who enjoy the process of being sold, but the majority of us don't like to be sold. When you start to ask them, well, do you like to buy? Pretty much everybody puts up their hand that they like to buy. So I always like to say, your job as a salesperson is not to sell, quote unquote, the customer. It's really to help the buyer buy. Because again, when I say sell the customer, or when people say, I've got to sell the customer, it really implies that you're doing something to the customer instead of with the customer. When you ask the customer, if you'd like to help them buy, this becomes now a process that you do together. And it can become a very, what I call, magical relationship, and almost dance together to help the buyer get to the end of the dance with a well-informed decision where they walk away feeling very good, very valued, and they got a great value for whatever it was they had purchased. So number two, set the attitude. One, you've got to be professional, first, last, and always. Two, your job is really to help the customer buy. It's not to sell the customer. And when you can approach it from that way, it makes it so much easier, because now you're just asking questions to help them make a good decision for themselves. The other thing about a professional salesperson is there's a very distinct language to a professional salesperson. Very, very professional salespeople carry and use a very, what I call, distinct language. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the language. And what I mean by that is, if you were listening to a conversation and it might be a conversation between two engineers, you might not understand the conversation because they would be using acronyms, they'd be using a particular vernacular that the two engineers would very much understand because they're both engineers, they're both professional. We might not understand it. Much like you'd listen to a conversation between two lawyers, two doctors, they might very much understand the conversation because of the language that's being used, but not, I'll say, us. Salespeople are usually, I'll say, the same way, but on the opposite. They use a lot of bad language. And what I mean by that is, I lost the sale. I hear that all the time from salespeople. I lost the sale. Well, how did you lose the sale when you never had it in the beginning? Because it's the customer who makes the decision whether you get a sale or not. Now, there's been sales that we have missed from that point of view. And here's the difference. Lost the sale. If I lose something, well, I never get it back. If I miss something, I can go back around. And in most situations in the selling profession, if you miss a sale, if you miss an opportunity, there's always time, there's always room, there's always a situation to go back. And simply by believing that and holding that as a salesperson, as a professional salesperson too, again, it helps you build a better mindset. It helps you build a stronger mindset instead of one that goes up and down. A lot of times too, we hear salespeople say, you've got to make 20 cold calls, particularly salespeople who've now become sales managers. You've got to go out there every day and you've got to make 20 new cold calls every day. Cold calls. Wow. If I'm a brand new salesperson and a sales manager comes to me and says, I've got to go make 20 new cold calls, I don't think I want to go do that. Just the fact alone that it's cold calls doesn't sound very warm and doesn't sound very inviting to me from that point of view. So in our language, and what I'll call professional salespeople's language, they don't call them cold calls. They call them hot knocks. And what I mean by a hot knock is, think of all your customers right now. Anybody that's in selling right now, even I'll challenge you, Caesar, think of your best customer that you had when you were selling for CanMade. That probably started from an initial prospecting call somewhere along the line. And so I always like to coach, work with professional salespeople and get them to believe that, yes, let's go do 20 hot knocks every day, because out of those 20 hot knocks today, your next best customer might be one of those. And so rather than a cold call, which sounds, again, very difficult and certainly not encouraging to the mind, hot knocks means, man, my next customer might be that next phone call. Even today, and I'll cite you an example, because I still do some selling, I'll say some contract sales for some of my business owners that I coach and mentor. One, because they want me to help them grow their business. And two, it's a great example to show as a role play for some of the existing customers. So even today, I'm going to say about 20-25 hot knocks in the software space out here with the oil and gas in Calgary. And out of those 25, I booked 2 new appointments for this one company. And they could turn into substantial opportunities from that point of view. And you know what? At the end of the day, I had fun doing that. I had fun being successful in terms of booking those 2 appointments. And those 2 individuals that we're going to follow up the week, I think we booked both of them for September 22nd. They could be great opportunities on both sides, in the sense of very much help the company that I'm doing the contract selling with, but also help the customer on the other side.
Bruce,
so it is
Bruce, yeah, Bruce,
yeah,
I wanted to say something. There is also a question about the product that you're selling and the kind of approach that you have to take. For instance, if you're selling vacuum cleaners to the consumer, you may have to make 20 or 30 cold calls. But if you're selling a product that you're representing a manufacturer, or a product that you intend to sell to a customer that is a repeat buyer, then I really don't think that there's going to be a need to make so many calls. I think that you have to treat each one of them as individual calls and work on that particular one in a longer period of time in order to be able to get the customer to to be comfortable in dealing with you. Don't you think that there is a difference? Yeah.
Well, what we're really talking about there is we're talking about new sales versus existing sales, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm really talking about all of those calls on new sales, even to the example and the analogy that you gave, Caesar, even if I'm selling vacuum cleaners door to door, because a lot of times back in the day, that's how vacuum cleaners were sold. There is still today some vacuum cleaners that are actually sold that way. And so if I've got to go in what I'll say, knock on 20 doors from that point of view, if I go looking at it saying, I've got to go knock on 20 doors and each one's a cold call, where's my mindset as a salesperson and how successful am I going to be? Where if I go call on everyone saying, this is going to be a hot knock and this is going to be another great sale for me, again, where's my mindset and where's it going to be? I've done a lot of work with real estate agents, and it's amazing, Caesar. If you look at the average salesperson in real estate across North America, how many homes do you think the average salesperson sells a year in Canada, North America, in real estate?
I don't know, maybe a dozen. one a month. Three a year. Wow.
Three a year. And here's one of the biggest reasons why, Caesar. They're reluctant to go door knocking. If you look at all of the top 10% of all real estate agents across Canada, regardless of what province, they've gotten out and they've knocked on hundreds of doors. If you're wanting to be a successful real estate agent, you've got to go and do that door knock. And where I'm going with it is if you have the mindset that every door you knock on is a cold call, chances are you're not going to be successful and you're not going to do it. If you have the attitude that every door you knock on is going to be a hot knock and you'll drive your business, you're more likely to do it. And that's where I'm really going with what I'll say the sales language is really to implant in professional salespeople, the attitude of success, as opposed to setting a lot of what I'll say good young salespeople up for failure simply by the language that we use. Okay. The other is we talk about a high pressure salesperson. We talk about a high pressure salesperson, and everybody. I do this all the time when I'm in a class with 100, 150 salespeople, and I ask them, who here does not want to be a high pressure salesperson? And I get every hand that just shoots up in the air like rockets. And I say to them, okay, great. Then tell me what it is that you don't want to be. I get you don't want to be a high pressure salesperson, but what is it to be a high pressure salesperson? And they can't define it. And the reason why they can't define it is we've never identified it. We don't have what I'll say language to it. And so when you start to say, okay, what is it about a high pressure salesperson that you don't like? You hear things like, well, they're pushy. Well, they ask for the sale a lot. Well, they try to get me to buy something that I don't want. Some of those are very accurate. Some of them not so much. I mean, a good professional salesperson, they're going to ask for the order quite a bit. But they're professional about it. What it is to be a high pressure salesperson is you're selling the product, you're selling the service for your benefit, not for the customer's benefit. And that's ultimately what we don't like. So where I'm going with that is, by definition, if the customer believes that you're selling your product and service for your benefit and not for their benefit, by definition, you're going to be considered high pressure. So in order to stay away from that, you've always got to be looking at what's best for the customer first, last, and always. Okay. And where I'm going with that leads to the next thing about a professional salesperson, in the sense that a professional salesperson always sells by asking questions. A good professional salesperson, you can tell a good professional salesperson simply by stepping back and watching them interact with a customer and or with a particular prospect, because they'll ask a lot of questions. They have a curiosity to learn. They have a curiosity to, what I'll say, understand what the situation is so that they can truly help. Because until you know the situation and until you know what the buyer wants to accomplish and what the timelines are, what the constraints are, you really can't understand the situation and you really can't help them. So a good professional salesperson is one who always asks questions. And by asking questions from that point of view, they're starting to learn, they're starting to discern, they're starting to understand exactly what the situation is. And then they can talk about their products and services in a way that not only aligns with what the customer wants, aligns with the customer's need, align with the customer's wants. And if they've done a good job, they would find out where their affordability is. So the product and service that they put in front of them is aligning with their affordability. A lot of times, what I'll say, way too many salespeople start talking too much and not asking a lot of questions. So anytime I'm working with salespeople, I literally want them to sit down and develop a list of anywhere from 10 to 12, 12 to 15 good questions that they want to ask the individual first to kind of really ascertain what the situation is. Here's where this comes from too. And this I'm going to put back a little bit on what I'll say businesses from that point of view, that when they train the salespeople. If we're going to take a top producing professional salesperson and cut that person into what I'll say 3 categories, okay? The 3 categories are product knowledge, confident selling attitude, and selling skills. If you're going to be a good professional salesperson, you need product knowledge, you need a confident selling attitude, and you need what I'll say good selling skills. The problem that happens here is most salespeople and most organizations believe that product knowledge is way more important than what it is in terms of helping a customer make a buying decision. It really is only 14% of their success, okay? But yet companies spend time and time and time again training the salespeople on product knowledge, especially in some what I'll say product related industries. And so what ends up happening is the salesperson in their training has received 80 or 90% of their training on product knowledge and very little on selling skills and attitude training. They go meet somebody for the first time. They're a little nervous. The person's a little nervous. So what do? They talk about what they're comfortable about, which is product knowledge. And now all of a sudden, we're introducing product knowledge too early into the sale. And again, I don't want you people to misunderstand me. Take away product knowledge, I don't have a professional salesperson. It's just not as enormously important as what most people believe. And the most critical thing about product knowledge is timing as to when to bring it up. If we look at how buyers buy, I did one of the presentations earlier on about how buyers buy. And the first 2 steps when a buyer buys is they first buy the salesperson. So they get to like, listen, and trust the salesperson. Then they buy the company. They get to like and trust the company. Then they buy the products and services. That's when a good professional salesperson brings up their product knowledge, is after they've got the individual, quote unquote, buying them as a salesperson and buying the company. If I start talking about product knowledge right away, the buyer's pretty much apt not to listen to me or listen to my product knowledge, because they're saying, I don't know if I like Bruce yet. I don't know if I trust Bruce. I don't know if I want to listen to Bruce. And so again, when we're working with salespeople, yes, we want them trained on product knowledge. And that really is the responsibility of the company and the business owner. I then like to say to business owners and companies, go get a good, what I'll say, sales model that can come in and train your salespeople both on selling skills and confident selling attitude. One flows to the other. And that's really where 86% of their, what I'll say success is going to come from. Here, where I'll talk about that is, I know we've all seen examples of a salesperson going from one industry to another, where it's a completely different product. And yet very quickly, they'll get into pretty good success. Why? Because it's the selling skills and the confident selling attitude that really helps them do the first 2 steps of the sale. And then anybody can learn the product knowledge afterwards. So that's what we like to go. I want to go back to the high pressure salesperson for a moment as well too, because I want to categorize what I'll say salespeople as well too. I've worked with thousands of salespeople in my career. And I'm going to categorize salespeople into 4 different buckets. And the reason that I want to do this is that anybody listening, I want you to kind of take a self-examination of what bucket you think you're in now and what you have to do to get to what I'll say that professional bucket. I'm going to say about 40% of all the salespeople that I've interacted with, I call them what I call commercial visitors. They're very nice people. And they go and they visit, they don't go and sell. Meaning they go and call on a lot of existing customers. They very rarely call on a lot of new customers, and they go call on existing customers, find out what's going on. They're very good at conversation. They're very, I'll say, nice people. They're very friendly, and they literally go and visit with the customers. They don't go and, what I'll say, sell with the customers or help the customers buy. And because of this, they do get successful. But generally speaking, the large portion of a client's business is usually going to some other salesperson and not to the commercial visitor. How you can tell these individuals, or how you can identify what I call the commercial visitors as well too, is they typically very much have what I call a routing system, meaning Monday, they typically go see the same customers over and over again. Tuesday, they typically go see the same customers over and over again. Wednesday, they typically go see and their week is pretty much planned out. And whether it's going and seeing the same customers or going into the same territory, they typically do that the same time of the week over and over again. And they get on a routing system, almost like a milk run. My heart goes out to these people because they do invest a lot of time. They do invest a lot of hours. They work very hard, and they don't get the necessary reward for what the efforts put in. These individuals, I like to work with them by simply a few changes in what and how they approach their sales, a few changes in stop being nice and start asking some critical business questions. Find out what's going on in the business, find out what some of the challenges are in the business, find out what some of the goals and objectives are of the business owner, find out what some problems that the business owner has and how they want to, what I'll say, solve it, find out where their affordability is, and then start to offer them a solution. But another 40% fall into that high pressure side of it. That's why I wanted to go there. But another 40% of it fall into that high pressure sales. And I call that individual the commercial peddler. And they really go and peddle what I'll call products and services. It is very high pressure. They do very much what I'll say sell based on their benefit, not necessarily benefit for their customer. Some of them are extremely good salespeople. And what ends up happening is they do get one or two sales in the beginning, but then it's not sustainable. And so again, they wear out their welcome. Again, a lot of these individuals, you can identify them or self-reflect to see that, because they'll typically move from one company to another within an industry. And then when they've pretty much worked their way through that industry, then they go to, quote unquote, a different industry or a different brand in that industry. We see this a lot in the car industry where, somebody starts off selling Fords, then they go to GM, then they go to Chrysler, then they go to Honda, then they go to Toyota, because they've worn out their welcome in a particular dealership. Now, part of that, I'm going to defend what I'll say the car salespeople too, because the automotive dealerships and the automotive industry do have a belief that selling is something you do to the customer, not with the customer. Again, I like to work with these commercial peddlers simply by saying, change your approach. Really be there to help the customer buy first, last, and always, instead of trying to sell the customer. Take the time to develop the relationship with the customer in the beginning to where they like you, listen to you, and trust you. Start to take the time to sell the company, sell the value of the company by helping them start to understand what you do as a company and how you could benefit them. And then start to talk about the product. And again, sell to your customers first, last, and always what they want to buy, not what you want to sell them. And all of a sudden, magically, they get into better success. Their sales go up, their commissions and or their bonuses go up, their repeat business goes up. They don't have to sell as difficult, and they don't necessarily bounce around from opportunity to opportunity. The other is, I'm going to say about 13% fall into this. And this is where we're starting to this is where we transition that line from what I'll say a salesperson to a sales professional. And that's where I like to say there's the consultative seller. They're professional. They sell systems, they sell solutions, they sell at a very high level. They sell by asking questions. They go into companies, they ask a lot of questions, they find out what the business situation is, and then they present what I'll say many system structure processes as solutions to sell. And they do extremely well. Then there's that last group, that's that top 7%. And that's where I like to work with and get every salesperson to that level. And that's where I like to say, then you become what I call a sustaining resource. Literally, you are on your client's, I'll say, staff. They look at you as a staff member. They look at you as a member of their team. It's just that your company is, quote unquote, paying your salary, paying your commissions, paying your compensation. Okay. When you get to that level and you're a sustaining resource, this is where your customers are coming to you and they're asking you for help. They're asking you for your opinion. They're asking you for your advice. They're asking you, what should they do before they even take it to the marketplace, before they even start looking anywhere else. And because they trust you so much, because you've helped them so much, you've literally become, I'll say, part of their internal fabric, that whatever you suggest, they will just automatically go with that. I'll say Morrow, very much with some of the, what I'll say, long-standing, what I'll say, larger clients with CanMade, has absolutely gotten himself to where he is a sustaining resource. They call him, they ask for his opinion. When they're looking at putting their next year's budget together, they're calling him and they're asking him questions. When they have a problem, they first seek out him to say, how can you help us with this? And time again, Morrow is always there with the answers. Why? Because he's taken all the time to ask all the questions, to get to know all of the people. This is the other thing about a sustaining resource. They just don't know, quote unquote, their customer, i.e. the one person who makes the buying decision. They know the president of the company. They know the shipper and receiver of the company. They know the person in HR. They know the person in accounting. They know the person in production. They've integrated themselves, what I like to say, into the business, both vertically and horizontally, so that they know everybody in that business and they know how the business runs. And they literally could walk into the business at any time and ask for an appointment with anybody, and pretty much everybody would give them an appointment. Why? Because when they spend time with that individual, it's time well invested. They learn something more, they learn something greater. It's been time well spent. And so they're very much saying, yes, come on in. And Morrow has done a great job of getting himself to what I'll call that sustaining level with some of CanMade's, I'll say, biggest, largest, and oldest standing accounts as well too. And it's such a great place to be at when you're the sales profession. And so I would like to work with all salespeople going, where are you now? What 4 of those buckets are you in? And how do we have to work with you? And how can we work with you to get you to that sustaining resource? Because when you do that, selling becomes a whole lot of fun. And it becomes what I call this magical dance that you do with your customers, not to your customers. The other side of what I'll say good professional salespeople too is they focus on their performance. They don't focus on results. And what I mean by that, and again, let's take Morrow from that point of view, because he clearly understands the difference between performance and results. As a salesperson, as much as a lot of us like to think we can control our results, we can't, because at the end of the day, it's the customer who decides whether we get a sale or not. It's not us. But when we focus on our performance, we can control our performance. And the 2 things about performance is, 1, I can control it. 2, the better that I do with my performance, the more it influences the results in my favor. Likewise, the worse I do with my performance, it influences it to the negative. So it what I'll say puts me in control on a day-to-day basis, to where I can control not only the level of my performance, but the sense of urgency of my performance. And that's the other side when it comes to performance for a good professional salesperson. They bring the same urgency of their performance to day 1 of the month as they do what I'll say day 30th of the month. The average salesperson usually ends up taking the first couple of weeks of the month off, and then they're scrambling to try to quote unquote reach their results at the end of the month. A good professional salesperson brings that high sense of urgency and that high performance each and every day, right from the first day of the month all the way to the end. And here's the other difference that I like focusing on performance for professional salespeople than results. If I focus on results and I'm not successful, I don't know what I did to quote unquote miss the sale. Likewise, if I focus on results and I'm successful, I don't know what I did to get the sale. So it's not repeatable. Okay. The other side of it there is when I focus on results and I get the sale, my mindset's very good, but it hasn't been built on anything. So there's no foundation for it. And when I focus on the results and I don't get the sale, now my quote unquote mindset comes crashing down because there's no foundation. And so my mindset is always going up and down. It's never what I'll say level and increasing. Where if I focus on performance, there's going to be some times where my performance was absolutely excellent and I didn't get the result. And because I know my performance was good and it just didn't produce the result, my mindset can stay high. Likewise, from that point of view, when I don't get the sale, my mindset doesn't fall down. Also, too, I realize it's my performance and my process that is producing my results. So when I do get the sale, I don't get massively high either. I stay level. Again, I'll cite Morrow because we had a great conversation about this and we analogized it to golf. Because I don't know if any of you guys knew that Morrow back in the day when he was going to high school, he was a pretty good golfer. He was one of the best golfers in Ontario from that point of view, and he ended up going down to the States. I don't know if he went on a scholarship or not. Caesar would know that. But to play golf at a high level, and if you look at, again, good professional golfers, they understand very clearly that once the ball comes off the club head, they can't control what the ultimate result is. And there's a whole lot of things that can affect, that ultimate result, the green of the grass, the wind, and all that. But what they do is they focus on what they focus on. And that's what good professional salespeople do by focusing on performance and bringing what I'll say, a level of performance, a level of urgency each and every day that just guarantees them to be successful. The last two things that I want to touch on when we come to a good professional salesperson is one, they're very good at complimenting people. And the reason why they're very good at complimenting people is they're very observant. They're very aware, they're very observant of their surroundings. As they walk into a customer's office, as they walk into a customer's place of business, as they walk into a customer's warehouse, as they walk into a customer's manufacturing facility, as they walk into, quote unquote, a boardroom where the senior executives are, they're always looking, they're always observing, they're always highly aware of what's going on. Okay. And again, as I said earlier, a good professional salesperson asks a lot of questions. So they're very good listeners. So that when they're in conversations with 4 or 5 or 6 people, and even when they're not asking questions and somebody else is carrying on the conversation, they're always listening and they're picking up those nuggets of information that can help them with their selling. They're picking up those nuggets of information that can help them build the relationship to a higher level. They're picking up those little nuggets of information that can make their job easier when the right opportunity presents itself. And it might not be today, it might be 2 months from now, it might be 6 months from now, but because they've got that information and because they're observant, that when the opportunity presents itself, they can take advantage of it. And simply by being highly aware like this and highly observant, it puts them into a different space to where they become good, what I call compliment carriers, okay? Why is it so easy to criticize somebody and yet so hard to compliment? And yet most of us don't compliment. And a good professional salesperson, when you see a good professional salesperson, they're complimenting a lot of people on purpose by design, and they do it sincerely. Why? Because they take notice of what people do. They take notice of the little things. So when you're going to compliment somebody, compliment the little things, don't compliment the big things. The other, what I'll say, rule of complimenting to be a good professional what I'll say salesperson and what I call a compliment carrier. Compliment a person's action. Don't compliment the person. When you compliment the person's action, it's a much better compliment than if you compliment just the person. The last one, when it comes to complimenting, that I always like to share is when you compliment on something to somebody, tell them why you like it. Don't just leave the compliment half done and say, oh, I really like that. Go and explain to them why you like it, because now you're personalizing it to them and you're making it very sincere. So those are just some points that I wanted to highlight for people who are either getting into sales, want to get into sales, are in sales now, and they want to get to that professional level. And I always like to offer up, because I just absolutely love working with salespeople. If there's anybody out there who is listening to this in the future and you want to have a conversation about this, reach out to me through the Give to Get program. Would always love to entertain a conversation with you about professional selling, the joys of it, the benefits of it, and how it truly can, what I'll say, not only change your career as a professional salesperson, but literally create hundreds of jobs inside of a business for other people to go to work each and every day and take care of their families. So that's it for me right now today. If anybody has any comments or questions, I would love to talk about them.
From my end, Bruce, I think you touched on everything. And every time I thought I would wait and then I would question you on something or another, you came through it, you answered it before I even questioned it. So I think you're on top of your game all the time. And this is one of your forte as far as professional salesperson, and I think that you're very good at it. I really enjoyed it, and I thank you for it.
My pleasure, Caesar, and thank you for always coming on. Thank you for supporting us. We are, what I'll say, creating a movement. We're early on in that movement, but inch by inch it becomes a cinch, and Mauro and myself and the rest of the Give to Get team are having fun doing it. And you're a big part of it, just supporting it the way you do, Caesar. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great evening, sir.
You too. All right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye.